People-pleasing. You say yes when your body is screaming no. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. Smooth things over before anyone even asks. Keep the peace at your own expense. And you call it being easygoing. It isn't. It's a trained reflex, built under pressure, running on autopilot. Here's the mechanism. Somewhere in your history, someone else's mood controlled your safety. A parent's silence, a caregiver's temper, a household where calm had to be earned. Your nervous system learns fast, stays agreeable, stays small, stays safe, and nobody gets hurt. That wiring doesn't just fade with age, it goes quiet, sinks below conscious thought, and keeps running in the background for decades, shaping choices you think are freely made. Here's the thing. People-pleasing isn't kindness. Kindness is a conscious choice, made from abundance. This is a compulsion dressed up as virtue, made from fear. The real-world cost is brutal. You lose track of what you actually want because you've spent so many years tracking what everyone else wants instead. Ask yourself your own preference on something small and watch how long it takes to even locate an answer. That delay is the tell. It means the muscle atrophied from disuse, not because you never had it. It looks like generosity. It's actually disappearing. Perfectionism. You redo the email 5 times. You can't submit anything that isn't ready, and ready never quite arrives, no matter how long you polish it. You call it high standards. It's fear, dressed sharply, wearing a suit. Here's how it works in the brain. Perfectionism links your self-worth directly to your output. Every task quietly becomes a referendum on whether you're good enough to exist in the room. So your brain floods you with dread before you even start. Because failure doesn't register as a bad outcome. It registers as a verdict on you as a person. Here's the part most people don't sit with. Perfectionists don't actually produce more. Research on this is consistent. They produce less, slower, with more anxiety and self-criticism attached to every step of the process. The implication stretches across your whole life. You trade your 20s, your creativity, your rest, chasing a finish line that keeps sliding further away the closer you get. Ideas die quietly in drafts you never let anyone see because almost right felt safer than risking not enough. It promises excellence. It delivers paralysis. Overthinking. You replay the conversation at 2 a.m. You analyze the text message for hidden meaning that was never actually there. You call it being thorough, careful, responsible. It's actually your mind trying to grip control over something it fundamentally can't. Mechanically, overthinking is your brain mistaking mental repetition for problem solving. Each replay triggers a small stress response. Cortisol spikes, muscles tighten, your chest constricts slightly, and your brain misreads that physical discomfort as proof the thinking is doing something useful. So it loops again and again, building nothing, burning fuel. Here's where it gets interesting. The loop was never actually trying to solve the problem in front of you. It was trying to manufacture certainty. Those are 2 entirely different goals, and only one of them was ever achievable. The cost shows up quietly: exhaustion, insomnia, and decisions you delay so long that circumstance ends up making the choice for you instead. Meanwhile, the people around you experience your silence as distance, never knowing the real storm was happening entirely behind your eyes. It feels like control. It's actually a cage you built with your own hands. Codependency. Your mood rises and falls with someone else's day. Their stress becomes your stress. Their bad mood becomes your emergency. You call it being deeply caring. It's actually a blurred boundary between where you end and where they begin. The mechanism traces back to early attachment. If love as a child meant managing another person's emotions in order to stay safe, your brain wired connection and self-erase together at the root. As an adult, you genuinely can't tell the difference between loving someone and quietly losing yourself for them, because the two feelings were fused before you had language for either one. Here's the uncomfortable angle. Codependency looks like devotion, but underneath it's often about your own anxiety, not their well-being. You manage their feelings because your own nervous system can't tolerate sitting with their distress. The implication: relationships built this way exhaust you and rarely heal the other person either, because you're solving your discomfort, not their problem. Over time, resentment builds quietly underneath the caretaking, because no one can sustain rescuing someone else forever without eventually needing to be rescued themselves. It feels like closeness. It's actually two people drowning, holding hands. Emotional suppression. You say, "I'm fine," and mostly mean it, until the moment you very much don't. You pride yourself on not being too much. You call it composure. It's actually a locked door with the light left on inside. Here's the biology. Suppressed emotion doesn't vanish just because you stop expressing it. Research on emotional regulation shows it gets rerouted straight into the body. Elevated heart rate, muscle tension, a slow chronic hum of stress hormones circulating under the surface. You're not calm. You're just quiet on the outside while your body absorbs the bill. Here's the part nobody tells you. People who suppress emotion regularly are often rated by others as less trustworthy, not more, because something in the face and voice doesn't quite match the words, and people feel that mismatch even when they can't name what's off. The cost is a body that keeps score long after your mind has stopped consciously counting. It looks like strength. It's actually a slow leak. Controlling behavior. You make the list. You check it twice. You need to know the plan before the plan even exists, and deviation feels physically uncomfortable. You call it being organized. It's often anxiety, wearing a planner's clothes. Mechanically, control is a nervous system's answer to unpredictability. If uncertainty once meant real danger, chaos at home, financial instability, unpredictable adults you couldn't read, your brain learned that gripping tightly onto every detail creates a feeling of safety, even when the gripping changes nothing about the actual outcome. Here's the thing most people miss. Control doesn't reduce risk in the world. It only reduces your discomfort with risk. Those are two very different jobs, and only one of them ever actually works. The real cost lands on the people around you. They start walking on eggshells, quietly managing your need for certainty instead of living freely inside their own choices. Spontaneity starts to feel like a threat rather than a gift. And the people who love you learn to run every plan past you first. It feels like safety. It's actually a smaller and smaller room. Self-sabotage. You get close to the good thing, the relationship, the opportunity, the finish line right there in view, and something in you reaches out and pulls the plug. You call it bad luck. It's actually your own hand on the switch every time. Here's the mechanism. Your brain doesn't optimize for happiness the way you'd assume. It optimizes for familiarity, because familiar feels safe to it, even when familiar hurts. If your baseline growing up was instability or disappointment, success itself can register as danger. In an unfamiliar state your nervous system simply doesn't trust yet, so it drags you back to what it knows. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You're not actually afraid of failing. You're afraid of a version of your life you don't recognize and can't predict. The implication is a pattern that repeats itself across jobs, relationships, and cities, until eventually you notice the one constant thread running through all of it is you. It feels like fate. It's actually you, flinching from your own future. Hypervigilance. You scan the room before you've even fully sat down. You clock tone shifts, facial expressions, the temperature of a conversation, before anyone has said a single word out loud. You call it being perceptive. It's actually a threat detection system stuck permanently in the on position. The mechanism is neurological. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm center, learned inside an unpredictable environment to stay alert at all times, because missing a warning sign once had real painful consequences. Years later, the environment changed completely. The alarm never got the memo, so it keeps firing in rooms that pose no threat at all. Here's the part people don't sit with. Hypervigilance isn't intuition, even though it feels exactly like it. It's exhaustion mistaken for insight, because being right occasionally reinforces a system that is actually wrong most of the time. The cost is a body that never fully rests, even in rooms that are, by every measure, actually safe. Over years, that constant low-grade alertness wears down the same systems meant to protect you. Sleep, digestion, immunity, all quietly taxed by a threat that stopped existing long ago. It feels like wisdom. It's actually a nervous system that never learned the danger already past. Achievement chasing. You collect accomplishments like they're proof of something. Every promotion, every degree, every metric hit, and still, somehow, no relief arrives. You call it ambition. It's often a receipt you're desperately trying to collect for your own worth. Here's how it works. If approval as a child was conditional on performance, grades, obedience, being impressive in front of the right people, your brain fused your sense of value directly to your output. Achievement quietly stops being about the goal itself. It becomes an ongoing transaction with an invisible judge who never quite signs off on the deal. Here's the uncomfortable part. The finish line moves every single time you reach it, because the real goal was never actually the achievement. The real goal was to finally permanently feel enough. The implication is a life spent producing instead of living, chasing a feeling that achievement was simply never built to deliver. Retirement, sabbaticals, even ordinary weekends start to feel unbearable, because without output, there's nothing left propping the sense of worth up. It looks like a drive. It's actually a debt that keeps compounding. Emotional distancing. You keep people one careful step removed at all times. You're friendly, funny, easy to talk to, and somehow still, underneath it, completely unreachable. You call it independence. It's often a wall with a welcome mat placed cheerfully in front of it. The mechanism here is protective. If closeness once led to hurt, disappointment, or loss, your brain learned that distance equals safety and filed that lesson away permanently. So it builds a low hum of detachment into every new relationship before things get too real, pulling you back right as intimacy starts to actually deepen and demand something. Here's the part that stings. People with this pattern often don't feel lonely because others left them. They feel lonely because they left first, quietly, every single time, before anyone got the chance. The real-world cost is a string of relationships that all end the same vague, unfinished way, for reasons no one involved can quite name out loud. It feels like freedom. It's actually a door you keep closing before anyone can walk through it. Overexplaining. You give the reason before anyone asks for one. You justify why you're 5 minutes late, why you need the day off, why you chose the smaller portion, layering explanation on top of explanations nobody requested. You call it being considerate. It's actually a quiet plea for permission, dressed up as politeness. Here's the mechanism. Somewhere along the way, your reasons were once interrogated, doubted, or punished. Maybe a parent demanded justification for ordinary choices, or disagreement was treated as defiance that needed defending against. Your brain learned that a bare decision, offered without evidence, feels dangerously exposed. So it pads every choice with proof, preemptively, before anyone even challenges it. Here's the part most people miss. Over-explaining doesn't actually make people trust you more. Past a certain point, it does the opposite. It signals insecurity, and people start wondering what you're really defending against. The implication is exhausting. Every ordinary decision, from what you eat to how you spend an evening, turns into a small trial you're constantly building a case for. It feels like honesty. It's actually you, still waiting for someone's approval that was never actually required. Chronic busyness. Your calendar is full before the week even starts. Stillness makes your skin itch. You call it being driven, productive, someone who just can't sit still. It's often something quieter and less flattering. An avoidance strategy that happens to look like ambition from the outside. Here's the mechanism. Busyness floods your system with a low, manageable stress that crowds out a harder, less manageable one underneath it. As long as you're moving, there's no room left to feel whatever's actually sitting there, waiting for grief, loneliness, and an unanswered question about your own life. Motion becomes a form of numbing that nobody questions because it looks so much like success. Here's the part that's uncomfortable to hear. The busier you are, the less of your actual life you're present for, even while you're technically living every minute of it. The real-world cost is a kind of blur. As years pass, milestones happen, and you can barely locate yourself inside any of them, because you are always already moving toward the next thing. It looks like ambition. It's actually a very efficient way to avoid ever standing still with yourself.